It is that time of year again where we get those new little baby plants. Or maybe you have some house plants that are getting leggy and could use a repot. But no matter how you got them, you want to know if you can put them outside in your bonsai garden. There are a lot of different types of trees that people grow as bonsai, but the question is, are they all suited for growing in a pot outside? In this video, I'm going to explain which trees thrive in pots outside and which ones will burn their roots trying to find a water source in the summer heat. And at the end, I'll even show you one tree that you probably don't want to plant in the ground at all. So make sure you stick around for that. When deciding whether or not a particular tree is going to grow well in a container outdoors, there are three things that you really need to consider. The first is whether or not that tree has a naturally shallow root system or not. Most trees that have very invasive root systems do not take kindly to being confined to a container, such as this oak here. It's going to want to go deep and wide in search of water. Another example would be pine trees. They tend to grow very large root systems as well. So if you put them into a container, they're just going to be unhappy and stressed out. On the other hand, trees with naturally shallow root systems, such as figs and Chinese elms, are much happier growing in containers. The second thing to consider is the climate that that tree naturally grows in. If you live in a hot, dry climate, you really not want to make sure that you choose trees that are native to climates similar to yours. For example, this Chinese elm is native to the eastern United States and does really well in my hot, humid summers. But if you live in the Pacific Northwest like I did growing up, you really not want to avoid planting this tree outside in a pot because it doesn't do well in soggy conditions. Instead, you might choose something like a Japanese maple, which grows natively in that region and is much more suited to the cooler, wetter climate. And finally, the third thing to consider when choosing a tree for your bonsai garden is the size of the tree and its mature spread. You want to make sure that you have enough space for that tree to grow to its full potential. Otherwise, it's going to become root-bound and cramped in its container. A good rule of thumb is that you want to plant a small maturing tree in a smaller container and a large maturing tree in a larger container. For example, this Japanese maple is going to max out at about 25 feet tall with a 25-foot spread. So it does really well planted in a 15-gallon container. On the other hand, this white oak is going to max out at about 60 feet tall and 40 feet wide. And even though it's only about 8 feet tall right now, it needs to be planted in a much larger container than the maple because of its larger mature size. If you were to plant both of these trees in the same size container, the oak is going to outgrow the maple and eventually kill it by suffocating its roots. So now that we've talked about what to consider when choosing a tree for your bonsai garden, let's talk about which trees will actually do well in a container outdoors. As I mentioned earlier, most trees with shallow root systems will do really well in a container, but there are a few that stand out above the rest. The first tree that I want to mention is the ficus, which includes both the Ficus retusa and the Ficus microcarpa. These are two of the most popular trees to grow as bonsai, and they do really well growing in containers outdoors. The reason for this is because they have naturally shallow root systems and they grow very slowly. This makes them ideal candidates for growing in a container. What's more is that they renative to tropical climates and can handle the heat and humidity of a hot, humid summer. However, they don't like to dry out completely between waterings. So you may need to water them more frequently during the summer months. Another great tree for growing in a container outdoors is the carmona. The Carmona microphylla is a small evergreen tree that is native to China and Japan. It has small glossy leaves that turn a beautiful red color in the fall, and it produces small white flowers in the spring. The tree has a naturally shallow root system and it grows slowly, making it ideal for growing in a container. It prefers a location that receives bright indirect light, and it needs to be watered regularly during the summer months. A third tree that does really well growing in a container outdoors is the Hawaiian umbrella. The Schefflera arboricola is a small tree that is native to the island of Hawaii. It has large, glossy leaves that are deeply lobed, and it grows quickly, making it a popular choice for growing as a houseplant. The tree has a naturally shallow root system and it tolerates a wide range of conditions, making it ideal for growing in a container outdoors. It prefers a location that receives bright, indirect light, but it can also tolerate shade. It needs to be watered regularly during the summer months. Now that we've talked about 3 trees that do really well growing in a container outdoors, let's talk about one tree that you should never plant outside in a container. That tree is the Chinese elm. The Ulmus parvifolia is a small flowering tree that is native to China. It has small, thin leaves that turn a beautiful gold color in the fall, and it produces small, fragrant flowers in the spring. The tree has a naturally shallow root system and it grows quickly, making it an ideal candidate for growing in a container. However, it is a very invasive species that can easily escape cultivation and naturalize in the wild. This means that it can quickly become a problem in areas where it is not native. If you live in a hot, humid climate, then you're better off growing this one in a container indoors. I hope this was helpful for you guys. If you're looking for a tutorial on how to plant a tree in a container, you can check out my video on that here. Thanks for watching.